What happens if you drink coffee every day? This video is for you if you drink coffee every day. Coffee is in fact the most consumed beverage in the world after water. It is estimated that over 2 billion cups are consumed daily across the planet, and most of us do so without much thought about what is happening in our bodies. We do it automatically. Therefore, in this video, I will explain what truly happens when you drink coffee every day. I'll cover the scientifically backed benefits, the risks you should be aware of when you shouldn't drink it, and something that isn't often explained. What changes if you drink it black, with milk, with sugar, or with sweeteners. By the end, you will know exactly how to make the most of your coffee tailored to your situation. Let's begin. What happens when you have that first cup of coffee in the morning? We'll follow coffee's journey from when you drink it until it takes effect in your body. As soon as you take your first sip, caffeine begins to be absorbed and doesn't require complex digestion. It passes directly from your stomach and small intestine into your bloodstream. And this happens quickly. Within 15 to 20 minutes, more or less, it's already circulating in your blood. But the peak effect, that moment when you feel it most strongly, arrives between 30 and 60 minutes after consumption. And what exactly does it do in your brain? Caffeine acts like a key that blocks something called adenosine. What is adenosine? It's a substance that accumulates in your brain throughout the day, generating feelings of tiredness and sleepiness. It's like a natural alarm that tells you need to rest. When you drink coffee, caffeine occupies adenosine's place in its receptors. In other words, it blocks the sensation of fatigue, and the brain stops receiving the signal that it's exhausted. That's why you feel awake and alert. This doesn't just affect the brain, it also slightly increases heart rate and can elevate blood pressure, especially if you're not used to drinking coffee. It's a mild effect for most people, but it exists. It also stimulates the release of adrenaline, the hormone that prepares you for action. That's why you feel that little energy boost. You might ask, how long does all this last? The half-life of caffeine in your body is about 5 hours. This means that if you have a coffee at 8 a.m., by 1 p.m., half of that caffeine is still circulating in your blood, and some of it can remain there until the afternoon. Therefore, even if you don't feel its effects anymore, your body continues to process this caffeine for hours. And this has consequences, particularly for your sleep, which we will discuss next. What are the real benefits of coffee? For decades, you've likely been told that coffee is bad for your heart, that it can cause heart attacks, that it dangerously speeds up your pulse. However, recent science suggests the opposite. I'm not talking about small studies. I'm referring to research involving hundreds of thousands of people followed for years. So stay tuned, because what I'm about to explain may change your relationship with your morning coffee, or even your coffee consumption throughout the day. Let me start with a case I saw a few years ago, anonymizing details for privacy. A 67-year-old patient came in for a routine checkup. He was an ordinary person, retired, living a quiet life, walking every day, but he had maintained a habit for nearly 40 years, 2 to 3 cups of coffee daily, without fail. When I reviewed his lab results, something stood out. His liver enzymes were impeccable. His liver function was that of a much younger person. This was unusual for someone his age, especially considering his moderate alcohol consumption in his youth. When I asked about his habits, he hadn't smoked for 20 years, ate well and balanced, and otherwise had a normal lifestyle, except for his consistent, moderate daily coffee intake for decades. His liver health wasn't solely due to coffee, of course, but when you look at studies, you see that coffee has a real protective effect on the liver, and cases like his exemplify what research suggests. If consumed intelligently, it can be an ally for your health. So let's see exactly what science says about its benefits. First, cardiovascular protection. Have you ever thought coffee might give you a heart attack? Rest assured, current evidence suggests the opposite. Large studies involving over 500,000 people followed for 10 to 15 years, a considerable period, show that moderate coffee consumption, by moderate I mean up to 3 to 5 cups a day, is associated with a reduced risk of cardiovascular diseases, including heart attack, heart failure, and stroke. So you might ask, why is this? Because coffee contains antioxidants, polyphenols, which help protect your arteries. Think of arteries like plumbing. Over time, inflammation and cholesterol damage them. Coffee acts as a protector for these pipes, reducing inflammation and helping to keep them clean. This doesn't mean coffee is a medication, far from it, but it does have a measurable effect. Second, the brain and neurodegenerative diseases. This is even more surprising. Several studies have found that regular coffee drinkers have a lower risk of developing Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. We're talking about significant reductions. For Parkinson's, individuals who consume coffee have a 30 to 40% lower risk of developing the disease. This is statistically significant. It seems that in this case, caffeine may protect the neurons that are lost in Parkinson's, though the exact mechanism isn't fully understood. For Alzheimer's, the effect is more modest but still present. Coffee appears to reduce the accumulation of abnormal proteins in the brain linked to dementia, such as tau protein. If you're concerned about your memory or have a family history of dementia, this is noteworthy. Coffee doesn't entirely prevent these diseases, no, but it is an additional protective factor you can leverage in your favor. Third, the liver. Returning to the case I mentioned earlier. The protective effect of coffee on the liver is well documented. It reduces the risk of cirrhosis, fatty liver, and even liver cancer. And here's something interesting. This effect is observed with both caffeinated and decaffeinated coffee. This means it's not just caffeine responsible for this benefit. Other compounds in coffee, such as chlorogenic acids, seem to protect your liver. It's like having an extra shield against liver damage. Fourth, longevity. Longevity is a topic that sparks curiosity. Does coffee make you live longer? Studies show that moderate coffee drinkers have a lower overall mortality rate than those who don't drink it. But be cautious. This doesn't mean coffee is magical, which it isn't. So let's not exaggerate. What this reflects is that within the context of a healthy lifestyle, coffee is not only not detrimental, but likely contributes positively due to all the effects we've discussed: cardiovascular, brain, and liver protection. That said, coffee also carries risks, and these risks can be significant, especially if consumed in certain ways or if you have specific health issues. And this is what we'll explore next. What are the risks and side effects of coffee? We've already covered the benefits. Now let's move on to what many prefer to overlook: the risks. But we must discuss them. And I'll give you a heads up. Some of these side effects are more common than you think, and others are more subtle than you might imagine. We'll start with the most frequent. First, sleep problems. These are issues you might experience even if you only drink coffee in the morning. You might have thought, I only drink coffee in the morning and it doesn't affect my sleep. But here's the problem almost no one realizes and often doesn't mention. Caffeine stays in your body much longer than you think. Remember, I mentioned earlier, its half-life is about 5 hours. This means if you have a coffee at 8 a.m., by 1 p.m., half of it is still circulating in your blood. And if you have another at 4 p.m., some of the caffeine from that cup is still circulating when you go to bed. But the problem isn't just difficulty falling asleep, though that can happen. Something more subtle and potentially more important is at play. Caffeine reduces the amount of deep sleep. You might ask, what is deep sleep? That's the sleep phase where your brain cleanses toxins and your body truly repairs itself. In other words, you can sleep for 7 or 8 hours, but the quality of that sleep is poorer if deep sleep has been insufficient. You wake up feeling unrefreshed. This is especially crucial after age 50 or 60, as sleep naturally becomes lighter and more fragmented. Coffee can exacerbate this problem without you even suspecting it or realizing it. Poor sleep today leads to poorer memory tomorrow. It's a lot that simple. Second, effects on bones and calcium absorption. Something many women should be aware of. Coffee slightly increases calcium excretion through urine. While the amount isn't huge, it can be sufficient to cause long-term problems if you drink a lot of coffee and have low calcium intake. Think of filling a jug with a small hole in the bottom. If you keep refilling it adequately, the level stays consistent, but if you don't replenish it enough, the level will gradually drop without you noticing. We're talking about a very small hole. This is particularly important for women after menopause, who already have a higher risk of osteoporosis. So, if you drink 4 or 5 cups of coffee daily and don't consume enough calcium in your diet, each cup is depleting calcium from your bones. So, is the solution to quit coffee? Not necessarily. It's about ensuring your calcium intake is adequate through dairy, small fish with bones, and leafy green vegetables. And perhaps, if your doctor recommends it, you might need a calcium supplement with vitamin D, with the usual precautions we've discussed in other videos. Now, something that affects or has the potential to affect many people without them knowing. The third point, blood pressure. If you have hypertension, listen closely because this is important. Coffee can raise your blood pressure, especially if you're not accustomed to it or consume it in very large quantities. In people with normal blood pressure, this effect is usually small and temporary, not posing significant concern. However, if you already have hypertension, coffee can complicate blood pressure management. It doesn't affect everyone, but it does in some individuals. How can you know? The only way is to monitor your blood pressure periodically after drinking coffee. If you notice your pressure consistently rising, it's best to discuss it with your doctor. I'm not saying you have to quit coffee automatically, but you might need to adjust the quantity or the timing of your consumption. Fourth, anxiety and nervousness. This is a side effect many people don't strongly associate with coffee, but it's real. Caffeine, as we've established, is a stimulant, and as a stimulant, it can worsen anxiety in individuals prone to it. If you tend to feel nervousness, palpitations, or a sense of unease in your chest, a feeling that something is wrong without knowing what, coffee can amplify these symptoms. It doesn't create them out of nowhere. It intensifies what's already within you. And here's a common vicious cycle. You drink coffee for energy because you slept poorly, but the coffee worsens your anxiety and sleep, making you need more coffee the next day. It's like a cycle that's hard to break, but if it's happening to you, it needs to be broken. Next, an interesting question. Does coffee cause dependence? This is frequently asked. The honest answer is yes, it can cause dependence, but perhaps not in the way you might think. Coffee leads to what's called tolerance. What does this mean? It means that over time, your body adapts, and you need more coffee to feel the same effect. And if you stop abruptly after consuming it for months or years, you might experience withdrawal symptoms. What kind? Headache, fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating. It's not dangerous, really, but it's uncomfortable. It can be quite bothersome and typically lasts from 2 to 9 days. This doesn't mean coffee is dangerous or akin to other addictive substances. No, it simply means your body is adapting to your coffee dosage. Therefore, if you decide to quit or need to quit, it's best to do so gradually, reducing the amount slowly over 1 to 2 weeks, rather than cutting it off cold turkey. And what about coffee and cancer? I know this is a question many people ask, and it's understandable as there's been confusion on this topic for years. So let's clarify with facts. In 1991, an international agency for research on cancer classified coffee as possibly carcinogenic. This, naturally, generated a lot of fear due to its massive consumption. However, it turned out that this classification was based on older studies with methodological errors. In other words, what appeared to be a risk from coffee was actually the effect of tobacco, which many people consumed with their coffee, as many coffee drinkers in those studies also smoked. In 2016, the same agency reviewed over 1,000 new investigations and completely changed its conclusion. Coffee does not cause cancer. No, in fact, the largest studies suggest the opposite, as I mentioned earlier. Regular coffee drinkers have a 15 to 20% lower risk of developing cancer in general compared to those who don't drink it at all. Now, this doesn't mean coffee magically prevents cancer. It's simply a statistical association, but it's an association that repeats study after study, with hundreds of thousands of people followed for years. So there's something to it. In what types of cancer does this protective effect, or at least a statistical correlation, seem to be observed? It's clearest with liver cancer. Each cup of coffee you drink daily is associated with approximately a 15% lower risk of this type of cancer. And individuals who drink 3 to 4 cups a day can have up to a 40 to 50% lower risk of liver cancer. And you might ask, why is this? Because coffee improves insulin sensitivity, reduces liver inflammation, and protects against cirrhosis. All of these factors reduce the risk of liver cancer developing. Protection has also been observed in other cancer types, such as endometrial cancer, uterine cancer, particularly in postmenopausal women, also prostate cancer, melanoma, a type of skin cancer, and possibly colorectal cancer also show a protective effect. Let's not deceive ourselves. This protection isn't immense, but it exists. And you might wonder, what about other types of cancer? For most cancers, such as breast, pancreatic, bladder, or even lung cancer, no relationship has been found. No connection, neither good nor bad. Coffee doesn't increase them, but it doesn't reduce them either. It's true that for years, it was thought that coffee could increase lung cancer risk. This is due to what we discussed earlier. When studies were corrected to remove the effect of smoking, that association disappeared. The problem was, in reality, smoking, not coffee, as I've mentioned. However, there's an important precaution. It's not about the coffee itself, but its temperature. Specifically, there can be a problem if you drink coffee too hot, above 65 degrees Celsius, 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Intense heat over time can damage your esophagus, and this repeated damage does increase the risk of esophageal cancer. So be careful. However, it's also important to note that this isn't unique to coffee. It occurs with any very hot beverage. If you drink very hot tea, very hot mate, or even very hot water, the problem is the heat, not the beverage. It can also increase the risk of esophageal cancer. So what's the recommendation? It's simple. Wait a couple of minutes for the coffee to cool down a bit before drinking it. This doesn't mean you have to drink cold coffee, though I enjoy it, but rather drink it when it's not scalding. In summary, the current scientific consensus is clear. Coffee does not cause cancer, but it can reduce the risk of several types, especially liver cancer. So, if you enjoy coffee and don't have any of the conditions or health problems we'll discuss next, you can drink it with peace of mind. Of course, by consuming it intelligently. If your lifestyle is healthy, coffee is an ally, not an enemy. And now that we understand the risks, let's look at when coffee is directly contraindicated, because there are situations where you shouldn't drink it, and it's important to know this. When shouldn't you drink coffee? If you identify with any of the situations I'm about to explain, pay attention, because there are health problems where coffee not only doesn't help, but can actually worsen things without you realizing it. That's why it's important. And I'm not talking about rare cases, I'm talking about very frequent situations. Let's begin. The first issue is digestive problems, such as reflux and gastritis. Have you ever felt that burning sensation rising from your stomach to your chest? That acidity that appears after eating or when you lie down? If so, coffee might be part of the problem. Let me explain. Coffee does two things that worsen reflux. First, it relaxes the valve separating your stomach from your esophagus. Think of this valve as a door that should be closed to prevent acid from flowing upward from the stomach. Coffee opens that door. Second, coffee stimulates the production of more acid in your stomach. So it not only opens the door, but also increases what can flow up when that door is open. So if you have gastritis or an ulcer, imagine this. It's like pouring acid onto an open wound every time you drink coffee. Pain, acidity, and inflammation can all worsen. And be careful, this happens with both regular and decaffeinated coffee. Because it's not just about caffeine, other compounds in coffee cause this effect. And if you have frequent reflux or gastritis, try abstaining from coffee for 2 weeks to see what happens. Often, just that alone can significantly improve symptoms. Second, we have arrhythmias and a racing heart in general. Have you ever noticed your heart beating faster or irregularly after drinking coffee? If you already have a diagnosis of heart arrhythmias, especially those where your heart suddenly accelerates for no apparent reason, coffee can be a trigger. This doesn't happen to everyone, but it can happen. In fact, recent studies show that for most people, coffee doesn't cause arrhythmias, but for some individuals with pre-existing arrhythmias, it might act as a trigger. Coffee stimulates the nervous system, which can cause your heart to enter an irregular rhythm if you already have a predisposition. So, if you have arrhythmias, if you experience palpitations or tachycardia after drinking coffee, the most prudent course of action is to avoid it or significantly reduce your intake. This is common sense. And if you have heart failure, talk to your cardiologist about coffee consumption. In some cases, limiting caffeine is part of the treatment. And next is something that affects more people than you might imagine: commonly used medications that don't interact well with coffee. This is important because many people take medication daily and don't realize coffee could be interfering. So I'll focus on the two cases I believe are most frequent. First, medications used for thyroid conditions. Specifically, if you take levothyroxine every morning, which millions of people do, coffee can reduce the absorption of the medication. This means part of that pill isn't reaching your bloodstream and isn't going where it should. The solution? It's a simple one. Take levothyroxine on an empty stomach and wait at least 30 to 60 minutes before having your coffee. I've repeated this many times in videos because if you don't do it this way, the treatment might not be working as well as it should. And this can explain why lab results sometimes aren't as expected. Second case, certain antibiotics. If you are ever prescribed antibiotics like ciprofloxacin used for urinary tract infections or respiratory infections, be cautious with coffee because these antibiotics cause caffeine to stay in your body longer, which can increase the effect or side effects of caffeine, such as nervousness, insomnia, and tachycardia. You don't need to quit coffee completely here, but it's advisable to reduce your intake while taking this or similar antibiotics. And if you take any medication regularly for any reason, ask your doctor or pharmacist if coffee might interfere or not. It's a simple question that can prevent problems. In summary, coffee isn't for everyone and not in all circumstances. If you have reflux, gastritis, arrhythmias, or take medications like the ones I've just mentioned, coffee could be complicating things more than helping. The good news is that often you don't have to quit forever. It's not about that, but simply reducing the amount or changing the time of day you consume it can be sufficient. Now, if you decide to continue drinking coffee, let's see how to do it in the most intelligent way possible. How to drink coffee intelligently. If you've made it this far, you're probably wondering, okay, doctor, how should I drink coffee? How should I consume it correctly? Because up until now, I've been telling you about the risks, the benefits, and when you shouldn't drink it. But now we need to get practical. And let me be clear, this isn't about being perfect. It's about making reasonable decisions that work for you. So the first question, how much coffee is safe? Let's start with the quantity. The general recommendation, based on numerous studies, is that up to 400 milligrams of caffeine per day is safe for a healthy adult. This is roughly equivalent to 3 to 4 normal-sized cups of coffee. Think of it as a daily budget. You have 400 milligrams to spend. A cup of brewed coffee can contain 80 to 100 milligrams. So this means with 3 or 4 cups, you've already used up your budget. If you habitually drink more than 4 cups a day, the risks begin to outweigh the benefits. So keep that in mind, especially regarding sleep, anxiety, and calcium loss, which we discussed earlier and could be relevant for some individuals. And if you're over 65, your body metabolizes caffeine more slowly, so it's more prudent to limit yourself to 2 or 3 cups a day at most. The next question is when to drink coffee. Now, here's something almost no one knows that can change how coffee affects you. What do I mean? Many people drink coffee right after waking up, even before breakfast. And that's actually not the best time. When you wake up, your body already has high cortisol levels. Cortisol, as we've explained before, is the hormone that helps you wake up naturally. It's like an internal alarm system. If you add caffeine at that moment, you're adding a stimulant when your body is already activating itself. This can lead to more nervousness and anxiety. So, what's the ideal time? The ideal time for your first coffee is between 1 to 2 hours after waking up, which is when this natural cortisol starts to decrease. And that's when caffeine will work best for you. And the next question, what about the last coffee of the day? This will depend on you a bit, but as a general rule, try to have it before mid-afternoon. If you go to bed around 11 p.m., your last coffee should be before 4 or 5 p.m. And you might ask, why? We've partially explained this earlier. Caffeine takes hours to eliminate from your body. If you drink coffee at 6 p.m., by 11 p.m., some of that caffeine is still circulating in your system, and that can reduce your deep sleep without you realizing it. The next question is decaffeinated coffee a solution or a deception? This is a frequently asked question. What you need to know is that decaffeinated coffee doesn't actually mean zero caffeine. It has very little, perhaps 2 to 5 milligrams per cup, but it's not zero. To give you an idea, a cup of regular coffee, as I mentioned earlier, has 80 to 100 milligrams of caffeine. So if you drink a decaf in the afternoon, it won't keep you awake. But if you drink 4 or 5 decafs a day, you're starting to accumulate caffeine without realizing it. And here's something many people don't know. Decaffeinated coffee still affects your stomach the same way as caffeinated coffee, meaning it still relaxes the valve between your esophagus and stomach and stimulates gastric acid production. So if you have reflux or gastritis and switch to decaf thinking it will solve the problem, you might be quite disappointed because the issue isn't just caffeine, as I've already explained. So what is decaf useful for? It's useful for reducing your caffeine intake without giving up coffee, for drinking it in the afternoon without affecting your sleep, but it's not helpful for digestive issues. And now comes a part that almost no one explains, but which actually affects most people. What changes if you drink coffee with milk, with sugar, with sweeteners? Because very few people actually drink coffee black. They drink it combined. And this changes things considerably. Let's start with capsule coffee. I'm referring to Nespresso, Dolce Gusto, and similar machines, some of which are generic brands. I know many of you use capsule machines. They're convenient, fast, and the coffee always comes out the same, very consistent. So, let's clarify if it's as healthy as coffee from a traditional coffee maker. The good news is that capsule coffee, in terms of caffeine and antioxidants, is practically the same as coffee from a coffee maker. In this regard, you're not losing benefits. One of these capsules contains 60 to 80 milligrams of caffeine, similar to coffee from an Italian mocha pot. The problem isn't with the coffee itself. The problem is that some of these pre-made capsules contain more than just coffee. I'm referring to cappuccino capsules, coffee with milk capsules, mocha, caramel, and others, because many of these contain added sugar, milk powder, vegetable oils, thickeners, and artificial flavors. So, in the end, it's no longer just coffee. It's a processed product with coffee in it. Therefore, if you read the label of some of these capsules, you'll see they contain 8, 10, or even 12 grams of sugar per capsule. Of course, this is more sugar than you should consume in an entire breakfast. So, what's my recommendation? What I think, if you use these capsules, opt for those that are just coffee, espresso, lungo, decaf, whatever you prefer, but avoid those that are pre-mixed with added milk, sugars, or additives. And if you want to have coffee with milk, prepare the coffee black and add your own natural milk. I mean, use the black coffee capsule and then add your own natural milk. the one you bought separately, so you control what you're putting in it. Black coffee, coffee with milk, with sugar, with sweeteners. What really changes? I know many people drink coffee, but they don't drink it black, and that's okay. Macchiato, coffee with milk, with a little sugar, with sweetener. It's normal, it's your ritual, your way. But there are things I think are interesting for you to know about this topic. Because drinking coffee black is not the same as adding a few things to it. And some of these additions can nullify the benefits of coffee without you even realizing it. So let's clarify. First, coffee with milk. What happens with coffee with milk? Do you lose the benefits when you drink coffee with milk? This is a frequently asked question, and the answer is that you don't lose them entirely, but you do reduce some of the coffee's benefits. Milk has proteins that can bind to some of the antioxidants in coffee. And what's the problem? When this happens, your body absorbs these antioxidants less effectively. It's not that they disappear completely, but you benefit less from them. So we're talking about a reduction of about 20–30%. However, if you drink coffee with milk because plain coffee upsets your stomach or simply because you prefer it, it's okay. You still gain benefits, and moreover, with milk, you're adding calcium and the proteins that milk contains. So that's interesting. In fact, if you're over 60 and concerned about your bone health, coffee with milk can be a good option. Because, as we mentioned earlier, coffee slightly increases calcium loss through urine, but milk also provides calcium, like compensating for that loss at the same time. So, no, you don't have to give up coffee with milk if you enjoy it. The only thing is, be aware that you are slightly reducing the absorption of antioxidants. But really, it's not a major problem. Of course, what kind of milk? Use natural milk. Don't use milks that are already sweetened or flavored with odd things. It doesn't matter if it's whole, skim, or semi-skimmed milk, but make sure it's natural milk. Ultimately, it's more a matter of taste than health. But now comes something important: sugar. What happens with sugar? This truly negates the benefits of coffee, meaning if you drink coffee with sugar every day, you're starting to have a problem because added sugar turns a healthy drink, coffee, into a beverage that increases your risk of diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular problems. The issue is that the sugar you add to your coffee cancels out the benefits we discussed earlier. So we're talking about something significant. Consider that 1 teaspoon of sugar is about 4 grams, and if you drink 3 coffees a day with 2 teaspoons of sugar each, that's about 24 grams of sugar from coffee alone, almost all the sugar you should consume in an entire day. These are calculations. The problem isn't just the calories. Sugar spikes your blood glucose, causes your blood sugar to rise, and leads to insulin resistance. Over time, it becomes less effective, generally increasing inflammation and health problems. And if you like your coffee without sugar, I understand, but I propose something. Try to gradually reduce the amount of sugar you add. Start with a little less each week, and you'll see that within 2 or 3 weeks, your palate will adapt, and eventually, you won't even need it. This is probably the most important change you can make. The next question is sweeteners. What happens with sweeteners? Many people switch from sugar to saccharin, stevia, or sucralose. So the question is, are they safe? Well, yes, they are generally safe. There's no solid evidence that they cause serious problems in typical small quantities. But there's a detail. Sweeteners maintain your palate accustomed to sweet flavors. This can lead you to continue seeking that taste in other foods. This doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen, and it's important. Therefore, my recommendation is that if you use sweeteners to quit sugar, that's perfect. But the goal should be to get used to consuming coffee unsweetened, or at least to reduce the amount of sweetener over time. The next question is plant-based milks. What about oat, soy, or almond milks? Are they better than cow's milk? Not necessarily. This is something very trendy right now. Coffee with oat milk, soy milk, almond milk, are they better? It depends on what you're looking for. Soy milk is perhaps the most nutritionally similar to cow's milk. It contains protein, and if it's calcium fortified, it would be a good alternative to use. What about oat milk? It has less protein but more fiber. And if it's also calcium fortified, it could work. And what about almond milk? It has very little protein and very few calories. Nutritionally, this beverage doesn't offer much unless it's calcium fortified, which would be interesting. The problem with all these beverages, many contain added sugar. We're back to the same issue. So read the label and check for sugar. If it says it has added sugar, avoid it. Look for unsweetened versions. And regarding the antioxidants in coffee, what about plant-based milks? They slightly reduce absorption, just like cow's milk. So there isn't much advantage in this case. In summary, if you drink coffee with milk, opt for natural, unsweetened milk, which is fine. If you drink black coffee, also without sugar, that's great. But if you add sugar every day, you're spoiling something that could be healthy. Regarding in a way that's sustainable for you. But don't add things that ultimately do more harm than good. With this, I believe you have all the information. As I've said, coffee has real benefits. It protects your heart, brain, and liver. And the key here is to drink it correctly. I've mentioned that 3 to 4 cups a day before mid-afternoon and without sugar would be the ideal way to consume it. And if you have reflux, arrhythmias, or significant anxiety, coffee might not be for you. But for most people, coffee can be an ally for health. So enjoy it, but do so consciously. And now, tell me, how many cups of coffee do you drink per day? Do you drink it black, with milk, with sugar? Have you noticed any changes after modifying how you drink it? Leave it in the comments because I read them all, especially in the first 24 hours. And I try to respond as much as time allows. If this video has clarified your doubts or helped you make better decisions about coffee, share it with someone else who drinks it daily, because you might be doing them a favor and helping them take better care of themselves at no cost. And if you want to continue learning about health and prevention, here's another video I think you might find interesting on related topics. Remember that this video is for informational and educational purposes only and does not substitute for the relationship or consultation with your doctor or a health professional directly. A hug, take care, and see you in the next video.